Welcome to the High Agency Podcast with your host, Noah Ravoy. You have been programmed, and I've been programmed. In fact, virtually every human being on the planet has been programmed. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's how society prepares us for adult life. However, now that you know you've been programmed, you're responsible for taking control of your own programming. For whoever controls your programming is your master. And if you wish to be your own master, you must be the one that manages your programs. Tonight's guest, GritCult, is an expert at human programming. And we're going to talk about how programming works in people, and we're going to talk about agency, and let's just see where this goes. Welcome, GritCult.
Hey man, nice to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Could you tell us a little bit about how you came up with the name GritCult and what it's all about?
Yeah, sure. I kind of fell into the name. It wasn't a conscious thing, but the cult aspect was. So people have called me Grit for quite a while, and people just say Grit instead of GritCult. But the cult aspect was definitely conscious. With that, it was very much a noticing of the world around me. I didn't really understand the true definition of a cult and how it separated from other forms of culture, I suppose. And cult is a very micro or focused way of saying a large tribal collection of people, or a cybernetic organism in a sense. So yeah, that's more or less how I came about it. Just through a fascination of cults, more or less. The grit aspect is something that's stuck around with me for quite a while. People have called me that, and it's just a combination of the two. So this is the grit cult.
Excellent. I had a little bit of connection issue there, so I missed a bit of that, but I think it still records for the public to hear. So that's great. Yeah, one of the things that I notice you talk a lot about is how people are programmed, and I'd like to hear a little more about how you see that programming works in society.
Sure. So the programming aspect, it's the larger part of it is to do with memes and meme theory. A lot of the things, a lot of the way that I see the world is essentially, I see, I borrow a lot from memetics. So that's basically the analogy of memes or ideas or concepts, whatever you want to use, right? And they are essentially operating in a their own kind of realm, and human brains or other forms of cognition are in a sense nodes for these memes to pass through. One of my theories is essentially that as a meme passes through your brain, it effectively changes your brain. And there's this whole notion around the placebo effect and Stockholm syndrome and all these biases, inbuilt heuristics that are faulty with the human brain. I think memes in a sense have or can co-opt and control. So for instance, some may say that religion is a meme, but if you actually go deeper, there is a kind of a symbiotic relationship between the meme of religion or God, not a comment on those specific things, but rather that the notion or the idea of these things that elicit faith have a lot of benefit and provide a lot of value to the host of the meme, for instance. So that is a larger kind of question regards to what is a meme and how does it affect the person. So if you can undergo a series of programming, for instance, by subjecting yourself to very extreme memes. So there's this question of radicalize. I've studied a lot of things regarding online radicalization, and so one of the things I've noticed is that people have a tendency to get bored of normality in a sense. So there's this the hedonic treadmill. So once you're so used to a stimuli, it no longer excites you, it no longer elicits a response. So what ends up happening, especially with in a lot of fields. So for instance, weird ideologies on the internet, you can basically meme yourself into a new ideology, a new radicalized fringe ideology. So, for instance, furry Nazis exist, funnily enough, or right, very extremely libertarian guys that are, of a certain gender, I suppose, that they've opted into. So it's it's not as how to summarize. So in a sense, it's very much you can meme yourself, and due to declining marginal returns on these stimuli, you are basically subjecting yourself to a brainwashing, whereby you're so for and it's the same similar thing. It's a similar kind of pathway with porn addiction or any types of addiction, but I definitely believe that it applies to the human mind as well.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. And I think that there are ways in which it is used upon us. There are ways in which we can choose to use it to ourselves. And you mentioned the example of online radicalization. And we always assume radicalization is a negative because generally people who radicalize themselves end up doing a bunch of negative things. They end up going to an extreme. On the other hand, it's always been the so-called radicals, the people who are pushing the envelope on society that have done all of the great civilization building, have done the great artwork, have done the things that were hard to do because they radicalized themselves.
Yeah, totally.
What's his name? Isaac Newton basically got locked inside one winter because it was cold and he didn't want to go outside a lot. And he came up with several of his important theories during this time. It's pretty radical to lock yourself away from the world to think about math, but it worked for him. And I think for us, we have to see the real issue is are we under the control of the meme, or are we using the meme as a tool to prep our mind for something that we want to do that's really great? If you're really overweight and you want to lose, say, 100 pounds in a year, that's a pretty radical weight loss. Anyone would call that a radical weight loss. You might have to subject yourself to a certain set of memes in order to, or a certain set of ideas to prep your mind to go through the discomfort of being essentially hungry for a year.
Yeah.
I know some trainers that they messaged their client every day, 1 or 2 times a day. So are you still a fat fuck? And they were memeing him into taking action on his obesity. And it actually worked. Now, I don't think that's going to work on everyone the same way, but it works on some people. So there is a positive way to use it and a negative way to use it. And the book that I wrote has a lot to do with how to take control of that programming and use it to get what you want, but also how to look inside of us. I think a lot of us are very unconscious of the programs we're operating under. We're making decisions because it feels right. We're not exactly sure why, but we've been programmed, and there's that program's running in the background, and it's making us do certain things. And that's fine if our life is working out and everything's going good. But when something's suboptimal, that's probably one of the first places I would look, is that deep programming and where it might be malfunctioning.
No, definitely. And I think one of the things that I like to preach or think about is your environment. So humans, tend to adapt to their environments, but at the same time, we can change our environments. We're not, subject, or we're not slaves to. I mean, some people are very much, they find it very difficult to change, but it's not impossible. I definitely think everyone has this capacity and capability to change, but at the same time, you have to, take it into, conscious consideration. And it goes back to memetics and this whole theory of structuralism, which basically also states that language can shape the way you see the world. And this whole a good theory to look into would be general semantics. And then it touches upon your basic environment. So if you're constantly surrounded by the color red, how will that affect you? These are the kind of thought experiments I like to think about. But so essentially, if you're constantly subjecting yourself to, let's say, negative imagery, or just basic stuff that's very graphic and gory, you're naturally going to be desensitized to that. And I definitely think it I definitely think that that has an effect on people.
Hmm.
One of the main mistakes of the intellectuals of today is that they still believe in this notion of a human rational animal. We're completely logical and we can escape these things. If that was the case, everybody would be living 100% rational lives, and constantly optimizing, and we wouldn't have a need for a government or a law enforcement agency. Essentially, we would be angels in a sense. But I definitely don't think that's the case. My experience with humans is that it's the biases that are cooked into our hardware, our brains, in a sense, are very deep. And what we need to do, we need to make the choices that make it easier in a sense. So one of the concepts I like to think about is basically entropy. How much entropy is this going to cost? How mentally taxing is it going to be? How hard is it going to be mentally? I think that's one of the main roadblocks for people to actually enact change.
Hmm.
So like, yeah, that is essentially it. It's very, I agree with you that it's 100% possible to change, your programming.
Yeah, you brought up something interesting about our existing biases. A lot of times, the biases we have, a lot of them save us time. I have you get a certain food bias and preference. You don't need to constantly think about the nutritional value if you've gotten into a healthy mode of eating, for example. The problem is that we often develop biases that worked at one point in our life and don't work anymore. So if you're a little kid and maybe your parents are overly totalitarian and they're not giving you any freedom the freedom they should give you, and you develop this bias of I better just listen to authority or I'm going to get whipped. Then you become an adult and you become essentially a person that anyone can take control over because you just do whatever an authority figure says. You do what your boss says, you do what the government says, you do
Yeah,
whatever, and you don't question it. Your old bias that may have kept you alive through childhood, through basically an abusive childhood, it's now harming you as an adult. And a lot of the problems that we have as adults are because we're running software that was designed for childhood or even for a dysfunctional childhood, and it's now killing us. Or maybe that bias worked 100 years ago. Maybe that social system and programming that we had that worked well for our great grandparents, and we're still running it now in 2021, and the world has changed and we're getting our ass handed to us because we're running old software. And that's why it's so important that we are able to go and look at that and see what's working and what's not.
no, totally, and I think um, you know there's one. I don't know. There is quite a lot of theories about this, and trying to influence other people. So there's a whole field of study called behavioral economics, and they essentially came up with a theory of nudge. So small nudges, these notifications that people have, these are all nudges, and another nudge would be basically instead of opting in to be a donor, uh, an organ donor, like you have to opt out. So, and that increases the organ donor rate mainly because people are just too lazy to opt out. And a lot of companies are doing this. They just make it very, very hard to stop using their services, for instance. So yeah, I mean, it's 100% being manipulated by people, and people 100% totally understand the economics of decision making. And that's what I think. Touching upon your larger theories on agency. It touches upon this ability to make decisions, and not only decisions, make ability to make good decisions. And one of the things that was told to me by some people was that life is all about choices.
Mhm.
You can choose to do a life of crime, or you can choose to go make an honest living. It's all your choice, and I've been just carrying that with me very closely. So I can be choosing to be on this podcast, or I could just be choosing to watch Netflix or something, and it's all a choice, and I think that definitely helps. And all these other notions of there is no free will, or these people are I can't remember his name, Sam Harris or something. He's just some guru, but essentially he says he presents it in a very binary way. But I don't like to think in those terms at all. It is, you do have a lot of choice, but you also have to, address your limitations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you want to manipulate someone, the first thing you must convince them of is that they have no free will, and therefore they become much more easy to manipulate. You're just going to run whatever programming I give you. Well, how do you decide what programming to give me? Do you have free will? Am I the only one that doesn't have it? Or are you the only one that has
Yeah.
it? And it becomes a self-defeating question. And this is exactly what I help people do in the very first chapters of my book, is to identify where the limits on your
Yeah.
free will are, where the limits on your agency are. If we have if we're, let's say, I'm a pretty physically fit guy, I enjoy exercise. And one of the things that I need to keep in consideration is where my physical limits are. So if I'm going to deadlift a certain amount of weight, and suddenly I think I'm just going to deadlift twice as much weight. Well, that's how I'm going to get hurt, because I'm not respecting my body's limits, and I'm going over what I'm currently trained for. And so we have that psychologically as well. We have limits to our ability to demonstrate agency. And I actually enumerate 7 different limits. And one of the big ones that people have is mindfulness. That is the ability to control our impulses. And I think in society, we've been told we don't have any free will. We've been told we can't control our impulses, because we also have this really powerful mass media that tries to, and social media as well, that tries to decide what our impulses are for us. So it takes those base impulses, and basically our impulses as humans are reproduce, eat, don't get cold, don't get too hot, and if you're a man, that might include fighting. And these are your impulses. They come from that little lizard part of the back of your brain. And then that gets taken by marketers and others and manipulated into getting us to buy products which make us feel like we're fulfilling those impulses. When you have mindfulness, though, when you're able to control your impulses, that impulse comes out of that little lizard brain, and you look at it and you say, is this the right time to eat? Is this the right thing to eat? Am I destroying my health by overeating? You can start asking these questions. And if you can convince someone that they have to act only on their impulses and there's nothing else there, you can get a lot of control over them. But you can also get control over them by convincing them that they have no limitations, and that they can think their way out of everything, because then you can tempt them beyond their ability to control that impulse, and you can get them on the other end. And so these are really basically manipulation tactics.
I mean, the latter point is very interesting, mainly because I like to encourage people to challenge their beliefs, in the sense that anything is possible. I don't know, in business or whatever venture I'm facing, a person will come up to be like, I can't do it, and then what I'll try to do, I'll try to break down their self-imposed limitations. Let's say, I can't make 10K a month or something. I'm like, why? And I just keep asking why, and then we'll just get to the first principles of it, and it requires some outside the box thinking. But yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't totally agree
No,
with.
you're right, because what you're describing are self-imposed limitations. They're not real. They're not real actual limitations. It's not like you're telling a guy who's got no legs that he's got to go and become a top runner. That would be a real limitation. There are a lot of people, they think they're limited in ways that they're not actually limited. And what you're doing is really helping them to realize that that's only a limitation in their mind. It's not real.
Yeah, that is true. There are definite limitations, but I don't know. I mean, my general philosophy in life is like not to think about those as much as you do the options and
Mm-hmm.
possibilities. I think it's generally, you know, it white pills you. If you're familiar with the sense, I mean, of the
Yes, sir.
term, it's in your book. But essentially, so white pill is optimistic, very much seeing the positives of life, and then this ties into another theory that I've been trying to develop. It's this aesthetic, bringing back aesthetics as a forefront of philosophy. It's been, I don't know, I don't feel as though it's given enough attention as much as has rationalism. Rationalism has definitely given us a lot in in our current life, and it's developed quite a lot. but at the same time, we've kind of abandoned the aesthetics and developing our aesthetic sense as a civilization. So one of the things I like to talk about and like to write about is how we need to orient ourselves in an aesthetic way, even though we may not have a rational sense of doing it. So creating a heuristic would, in the sense that, does it look cool? Does it feel good? I mean, maybe the latter is not so great, but like, is this the kind of life I want? Is a good way of simplifying a lot of decisions. um, you know, is this the kind of person I want to be? Is this the kind of man I want to be? And to develop that even further, me personally, one thing that I like to do is, I'm a big believer of memento mori. So like my imagery on Twitter, my aesthetics very much kind of remind me personally about death. A lot of people think it's gory, or like, they get squeamish. But I mean, I think in the modern world, we're very much divorced from death and a death kind of sense. So, like, a lot of my aesthetic has to do with remembering death, and through remembering death, remembering my ultimate purpose, remembering God, and trying to think, will I be proud of this on my deathbed? What happened when I die? Is this the kind of person I want the world to remember me by? How am I going to leave the earth better than I've encountered it? So, like, these kind of things, I suppose, I would say maybe they limit your agency, but the same sense, they improve your decision making, and they align yourself, so making it easier, less taxing, using less entropy, and basically just orient your entire life, in a very positive manner.
Absolutely. Aesthetics is extremely important. We find things aesthetically pleasing not for any random reason. There's always some good reason behind that. We may not know what the reason is. We may not understand it. We don't need to. There's a reason that we're going to find something aesthetically pleasing. It is healthy for some reason. It's the
Yeah.
same reason we look at a human face and we can tell someone's more attractive or less attractive than another person. What we're really judging to a large extent is their health and their genetic health. And so we have this built right into us. It's a part of who we are. And I really appreciate your aesthetic there with the memento mori aesthetic. It actually is something that I go over in the book near the end. Is we have an activity where we talk about what's the worst thing that could happen. And we get guys to talk about, who are taking the course, or women, to think about what is the worst thing that can happen to them. Your family dies, you die, somebody else dies. How would you handle? Well, if you die, you can't handle it. But if someone dies, how are you going to handle it? If this bad thing happens to you, how are you going to handle it? And keeping in mind the fact that life is fragile sounds grim and cruel, but actually it's loving, because it reminds us to not take these things for granted, and it really makes us live life more openly and with less fear. It sounds funny, thinking about the worst thing that could happen should increase your fear, but it actually decreases your fear, because you realize all these bad things could happen, and what am I going to do? I'm going to keep living, and I'm going to keep being happy, and I'm going to keep, maybe I'll cry a bit when this thing happens, and then I'll get over it, and I'm going to live my life. And then I'm prepared when something bad happens. I'm not fragile. And someone actually asked a great question in the audience now. They just said, thus aesthetic is good because it expresses evolution. Yes, to a large extent, what we find aesthetically pleasing is things that are evolutionarily beneficial. Healthy appearances in human beings. We enjoy looking at beautiful food because it says to us it's probably nutritious. Now, this isn't always true. People take advantage of that, but we can choose that beautiful life. Generally, ugly food is not good for us. Generally, things that don't look appetizing, there's a good reason they don't look appetizing. So yeah, looking to aesthetics as generally a good thing is definitely very positive.
Yeah, I totally agree. Um, yeah, aesthetics. It's I think the crowd. There's a essay, I think, by some guy called Nick Land. He talks about hell baked, and he introduces a concept, and it explains a lot and it fits in quite well with Darwinian theories of evolution as well. So, everything that exists now is to an extent hell baked. So, everything that we deem in our heuristics and aesthetics, all the things that we deem as beautiful, for instance, it's there for a reason. If it wasn't there for a reason, it wouldn't be there in a sense. It's very unlikely, if it had a cost attached, to stick around after millions of years of evolution.
Absolutely. And you mentioned earlier that, we have, we're not completely rational beings. Humans aren't completely rational beings. And a lot of times what we end up doing is we use rationalizations to we make an emotional decision, then we rationalize it later, and then we tell ourselves we're very rational. And that's pretty, it's pretty much how most people make most decisions. And a lot of times we actually rationalize ourselves out of aesthetics. Oh man, I'm not gonna, why should I spend the extra resources on this beautiful thing? Why should I take time to dress in a way that shows that I respect myself and I'm dignified? And we'll rationalize ourselves out of something that we actually really feel like doing, because of the work. We don't want to do the work that's involved in it. So sometimes that rationalization actually takes us down the wrong path, and going with what is our gut instinct to take care of ourselves properly is very important. A lot of times people will be craving healthy food and they'll rationalize themselves out of what they need because it's something that they were told not to eat. I have a lot of people that have come to me and say, oh yeah, I was taught growing up not to eat anything with fat in it. My family ate vegetable fat for everything, margarine and vegetable oil. And I always used to look at butter and just crave it. I wanted to have some butter. These kids growing up, their brains were craving saturated fat. A lot of times the thing we feel like having, the thing that our gut instinct tells us to have, is probably the thing we should be having. I think we need to learn to listen a lot more to our inner needs, to those ones that are probably evolutionary expressions of what we need. And a lot of those are connected with aesthetics, with things that we want, things that are beautiful, things that make us more beautiful. And, the more we listen, you rarely ever see a depressed person in a beautiful environment. There's something there that we need. And I think it's important that we follow the things we need.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, that totally reinforces my point regarding, you know, surrounding yourself about with beautiful things. I don't know. I think I'll suggest people to also surround themselves with things that elicit a sort of fear in the sense of death.
Mhm.
I don't know. Maybe this is just personal preference, but I don't know. For some reason, I I find myself watching a Discovery Channel kind of documentary where like a gazelle is being eaten alive by a lion, and it just gets me thinking about and then it goes back to this whole point about memento mori and aesthetics and what these kind of things result. But yeah, those are some things that really interest me in terms of why am I so fascinated by a thing, and then I just ended up in this loop why I'm trying to find out essentially why I'm so curious about certain things and why I'm not curious about other things, and then it just the thread just keeps increasing, and I just got to keep pulling and pulling and pulling, and yeah, that's something interesting as well. I would say to the listeners as well.
Yeah, our ancestors, they had I think a lot more death imagery than people have today.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you mentioned things that remind you of death or stimulate that fear of death. And I think that there's two kinds of fears of death. There's the fear of not living, and there's the fear of dying. And today people are afflicted with a tremendous fear of dying, but they don't have the healthy fear of not living. And so they're doing all these things so that they don't die, but they're not doing much to ensure that they actually live. And the memento mori is saying, I don't want to not live before I die. I got to live before death comes, because death is coming. And that's a really healthy attitude to have. We have an entire world for the last year that has basically been frozen in place, afraid of a minuscule chance of death. Our ancestors, they faced 10 times, 100 times bigger chance of death from COVID, just going about their normal day. People died from scratches, they get an infection. They didn't let that stop them from living. They went out and they lived. At some point we're going to die. Before we do, we got to live.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I don't know. Then this kind of feeds into this whole notion of like YOLO culture. So you only live once, and then you get into this hedonic treadmill whereby people are doing crack, or maybe that's an extreme example, but that definitely is a I don't know. That's definitely an excuse that I've seen people use, but
Mm-hmm.
but my own counter argument against that notion would be that this is not exactly you know, trying to YOLO. There is a fear of missing out, but what they're doing is an escapism,
Mm-hmm.
rather than facing the, let's say, absurdity of life. They're trying to escape it, and I'd say, yeah, I think the harder option will probably try to be build something, live a noble life, and not being so hedonistic. That would be probably the greater challenge, and I see a lot of people, they essentially, um, you know escape. They'll use the same kind of rationalizations, and they'll escape the actual facing of the deep inner work that needs to be done. Um, and yeah, I think just to go back to your point, and I'm going to circle back. Regarding rationalization, I see this a lot. So there's a lot of people that think they're smart, and they, like you said, they make their own lives unaesthetic. They purposely, try to rationalize their way into something that's really ugly. Yeah, so I think that's a huge part, and I see that a lot with people that think they're very high IQ, and what they are better are able to do, is that they think they can reinvent the wheel, and through that, what they try to do is rationalize their own misgivings. If you ask a person, you know, if you think you're so smart, why are you not living the life that you want to live? And then they'll start rationalizing, and in a sense, trying to explain their failures away instead of just facing the truth. Like, I was lazy, or I didn't think hard enough, or I'm not as smart as I think I am.
Yeah, I see this with a lot of groups, that individuals that have damage and they're not able to pursue what they really want, they pretend they don't want it. They're not able to pursue beauty for one reason or another, or they've put themselves in a position where that's difficult, and so they decide they don't want it. And that's basically at the heart of the body positivity movement, which is really the "it's okay to be ugly" movement. And there is an actual body positivity. Okay, I am happy with the body that I'm cultivating and creating, and that is a good thing. But it's turned into I'm anti-aesthetic because I'm too messed up to pursue actual aesthetics, and I'm not going to do anything to fix that. And this is, it's not just in physical conditions. We see wherever you have totalitarian governments, in general, especially if they're communistic type governments, they intentionally create ugly architecture. We see this has happened a lot. I live in a country that has got a lot of ancient architecture, and I've seen them put some ugly modern thing in the middle of it, and it's jarring. It takes the beauty away of an area that is very classical and older, and very cozy and warm, and you'll put some ugly stainless steel statue or whatever in there. And if you ask a child and you say, "What is this?" they'll say, "That's ugly. That's garbage. Why is that here?" Because the child hasn't been programmed to say, "Oh, this must be beautiful art," or something like that. That we've been rationalized out of our aesthetic preferences, and it is designed. If you read the people who are behind this idea of anti-aesthetic architecture, it is designed to break people down, to make them more manipulatable, to make them easier to program, to take away their natural desires for beauty and for vigor and for health.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's okay to be ugly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm done.
Yeah. So Grit, what do you think we can do to try to, in our own lives, to make sure that we're in charge of our own programming and that we're doing things to be in a, you mentioned surround ourselves with reminders that life is finite, that death is coming. That's one thing that I think is very underestimated, perhaps the most underestimated aesthetic hack that we can do in the 21st century. What are some of the other things that you would recommend besides ensuring that we have a beautiful environment around us? Some of the things that we can do.
Interesting. So, in terms of developing a way to change your environment, I would say do an audit of all your friends. Um, this may sound harsh to people that you know, they essentially have been with their friends for a very long time, and I've seen it happen. So one thing you don't want to do is, be trapped by your friends, have these sort of golden handcuffs,
Mm,
or a golden noose. So do an audit of your friends, see who's around you, see what essentially they're bringing into your life. Are they taking more out of your life, or are they putting more in? And um, you know, then if you really really want to change your life, then you're gonna have to seriously consider, maybe having some new friends, or at least being on your own for a while. I would say, there's loads of ways of, treating solitude, and I'd say, go for very long walks on your own in nature, wherever you are. Like, try to go as, as close to nature as possible, and just start thinking about, like, essentially, these very deep questions in terms of what you want to do, how you want to live your life. Is XYZ person really, fulfilling their life? Are they just complaining to me every time we talk? Are they being a friend? Run an audit essentially of your life, and then, seriously sit down and be like, all right, this is not ideal. I'm not happy, etc. And then, you start slowly developing, um, solutions and plans. So, but the first thing is you definitely have to, sit back and think, all right, XYZ is not working. XYZ is, bad, is negatively affecting my worldview, and all these other things. So yeah, you need to be very conscious of your environment, understand what your environment is, how it's affecting you. So after you've done these things, then you can start slowly engineer your environment, start slowly engineering, what you're being fed, and this will just, result in positive feedback loops. I'm a big, I really liked the whole theory of cybernetics, um, by Norbert Wiener. He's written some few books about it, and he's written a book about religion and cybernetics. So essentially, what you can do, a lot of religions, they, self-feeding mechanisms. You go pray by yourself, then you pray in community, then you are ascetically aligning yourself with a larger, grander purpose. So after you've done all these things, it's a slow evolution, in a sense, whereby you're constantly evolving, and you're being conscious of your own evolution. And then what you can do is, then you start engineering and evolving your environment. So after you put yourself in a good environment, what you start to do then is you start working with people, and then you start being able to program them, in a sense. So there's loads of ways to do this. I help basically train teams. I was given, a agency owner, some advice about how to basically run his team's remote. So there's a lot of issues, and some of them speak English really well, some don't. And he was having a lot of issues, and I was just basically running him through, how to program people. So what you got to do, in a sense, is, you have to lead by example, and whatever they are capable of doing, you have to match it, if not exceed it. And this goes back to a guy called David Goggins. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but essentially he has this whole notion of, like, taking souls. Obviously, in a loving environment, you don't want to be taking souls of your family members. But essentially, what it does mean is that, say you're with a band of friends, or a group of males, and I think everyone should have, a group of males that they're very, fast paced with. They're doing shit together, they play sports together, or whatever, or they run a business together. And essentially, what you do is you push others, and they'll push you. So you just rub off each other, and through this feedback loop, you're constantly pushing each other, challenging each other, and like it's just a matter of seeing who's better, and it's this very friendly competition. But this is quite advanced, and you see it in very high performance teams, very high performance, athletes. So you have to lead by example, push your team, and like if someone on your like team, or if your person you're working with says, "Oh, like let's work at 6 a.m." You'd be like, "Yeah, cool. I'll be up at 5:30, going gym," and then you just like slowly push each other. So like either they'll keep up or they won't. But this is probably the tail end of your developing your own agency, I suppose. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a kind of positive radicalization.
yeah, totally, 100%. And like the thing is, it's like you can gain so much energy from this. So if I see someone that's very high energy, high pumped, I'm just by being around that person, I'm going to start being pumped. I'm going to start, start thinking faster, and just start pushing, the pedal down, going, moving the needle, and then motivating my team, and then it just ripples out, and everyone you're in contact with, is suddenly high performing, and then you look back at yourself in 6 months' time, and you're like, oh shit, that person's totally different. But you made slow implementing. You're implementing changes along the way. Small steps, incremental changes, and it feeds itself. Always try to take a long view, and what will help, again, going back to this momentum mori aspect, that will definitely help. Taking a long view. Like me personally, I could do very bad things to a lot of people, but what's constraining my actions, in a sense, is this sense of nobility and this sense of depth. That's always like, I could do bad business with people, I can rob them, or I could provide bad customer service. But at the same time, I understand I'm playing a long game here. I want to build something for my kids. I just want to develop a legacy. I want to be known as a good member, a good productive member of the community. I'm a big fan of honor and having respect.
Absolutely. No, and I like what you said earlier about taking the audit of the existing friends. I get often asked, how do I make better friends? And that's not possible to do if you're surrounded by low quality friends. You're not going to bring some great person into that group. They're going to say, no, I don't want to join that group. First, you have to leave the bad friends, and that requires an audit. Then you can find the better quality friends. And even then, that's not enough. You don't just find them. As you said, you program them and help them take a step up too. I've really been hammering on the men that I know that are in leadership positions recently, to say, okay, you're the alpha in your group. You're the leader in your group. That means it is your job not just to lead the group on its mission, but you got to take care of your people. You got to
Yeah,
pull them up with you, because your success is going to be dependent on them as well. And as we get into a more fragmented society, the lone individual thing isn't going to
yeah,
work anymore.
yeah. No, totally, 100%. I've dealt with leaders that did not want to take responsibility for every single thing that they are doing. So I work with a guy that's I look up to him, and he's probably the best boss I've ever had. And one of the things that he said was that you may be responsible, but I'm accountable. I'm accountable for
Mm.
about 30, 40 people underneath me, and if they don't perform, that's my neck on the line. And he said that, and I was like, all right, that's a game changer. So I've been enacting that in everything that I've been doing, and I've been learning a lot from him. And one thing that I've been trying to implement is like basically trying to up the game of every single person I'm working with, because I know for a fact if they are more high performing, that means more money is going to come to me, because they be making more money, and we've already got a long-term business relationship. So it's all about like elevating teams, and I like to work with people that are I like to have people on my team that are very loyal. So people that are very loyal. I mean, and then slowly you start building up their skill set, and then keeping and getting them up to a certain standard where they can keep up pace with a fast moving team. And there's so many different ways that you can do that, but like one of the ways is just build them up slowly, help them improve. And I had a call earlier today, and the guy said, I'm not sure if he'll be okay with revealing my name, but he is quite big on Twitter. So, and he was saying that his goal this year is to reach 50K a year from his agency, from his business. And I was like, I'm on a very similar goal, if not the same goal, by the end of the year. And we just clicked, and then and then from there we just start talking shop, start talking business, be like, all right, I understand what you're trying to do, I understand what I'm trying to do. We both, building value, we both want to help each other. And I have a lot of calls with people, and I've been, I think we said before before this podcast went live, essentially that we've been on calls, and a lot of calls that I've been on today have just been like check-in sessions where I'm talking to other business people, and I'm just basically giving them things. I'm just giving them updates and saying, all right, we talked about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. This is what happened. This is what I've learned. This is what I've implemented. And they're like, all right, maybe try this, maybe try this, maybe try this. Or like, oh, I didn't think about that. Or I've learned something, and they'll ask me for advice, and I'll just give them advice with, and it's very much, I believe, in terms of loyalty, you build loyalty by, providing value. And I'm a big fan of, people who are willing to show initiative, reach out to me or whatever. And, I've got actually an intern right now, and, the way he actually got it, I was a bit unsure of taking him on board because I've taken people on board before and it hasn't worked out well, but he kept chasing me up. He's like, hey, like after a week, like every day for a week or something, he would hit me up, and I think I missed a call because I had another call and I was busy. And he's like, "Hey, you didn't want to call," and he's constantly chasing up. And I was like, "All right, this guy's very enthusiastic, and he may not be very experienced in business, but he's got the right attitude, and that's something I can work with." And he's proven to be a very good asset. So like and I'm just helping him improve. And I'm he said like he wants to go to law school. I'm like, look, I can show you that you can make a month's salary in a week from that you would make as a lawyer. And that's been a very rewarding experience for me, and I'm just seeing him evolve and just get better. And everyone I work with, everyone on my team, essentially, I want them to level up, become the best version of themselves that they can be, so that my company performance would increase. It's and I think like yeah, what you said earlier regarding like the one man band, that doesn't work. We live in a society that's you're gonna have to specialize in something, and then you have to build up a network, a relationship. Like Twitter, it's about providing value first of all. Like people follow you if you provide value, and then secondly, if you build the good connections and if people vouch for you. So a lot of business that comes to me is through a personal network. People vouching for me. This guy's good. This guy's well. I vouch for him, and boom, that's a lot easier than just doing a cold outreach. Where you're very unsure, you don't have any testimonials, and you have to build all these things up. So yeah, it's totally. I would say like to like I would say to people, consider everything that you're going to do or say is going to be public knowledge. And that will like God's watching used to be the old phrase. Me personally, I still think God's watching. But these kind of concepts will definitely align you in a very ascetic sense, and will hopefully help you improve.
Yeah, absolutely. I like too how you said that you were unsure about your potential intern because you'd been burned before. And so the people who are most successful are the ones who like, okay, I got burned. What did I learn from that? How do I avoid getting burned again? But I'm going to try this again. Like I'm not giving up on this idea of networking and helping other people, because if you network, if you're helping other people, you're going to get occasionally it's not going to work. It's not always going to go the way you want it. And if you give up, then you're going to lose the network advantage. And you right nowadays we need that. There's nobody that's going to be able to be on their own and be successful. We need that network advantage. And so we're continuing to build it, even if we've been burned in the past. That's the kind of person that's successful.
No, totally. I'm 100% willing to give someone a go, and because the thing is, like, if you don't buy things, sometimes you need more information. Sometimes you might do everything right, and it might not go your way, especially in business. So the market could have turned, or you had the right business strategy, it just wasn't the right time, or certain person got ill. There's so many different factors, and it's very vital that you're constantly changing or challenging your assumptions. So I mean, I made some assumptions earlier today, and it didn't result in a good situation where then we had to mitigate it. It was all hands on deck, putting out a fire situation. We spent about 3 4 hours just trying to put out a certain issue with a client. And yeah, so again, like I made an assumption that certain people would deliver, they didn't deliver, and you have to mitigate that, and it's part of the game. Like one of my business partners was stressed, and I was like, man, shit happens. You just gotta, keep roll with the punches. change is the only constant. There's so many things I can just pick out of my mind to say to people, be like, this shit's normal. Get used to it.
Yeah.
Just adapt. People who survive in business, adapt. The best businesses that survive are the ones that can adapt most readily. But yeah, again, going back to this whole notion of you know, not being a loner, doing things by yourself. Um, I mean, honestly, just having a team with you, you're just going to do things a lot easier. You're going to be a lot more enjoyable, have a lot more fun. And then, but the thing is, like going back to human evolution and environment. If you don't have a very good high level environment where people are promoting you or pushing you or wanting you to be your best, then you I don't know. It's just going to be a lot harder. You might say you're an introvert or whatever, but you still have to have human communication, human contact. And our evolutionary history, we grew up in tribes. Men would hunt in groups, sometimes not eating for days, just chasing, prey, and relying on each other. Division of labor, all these things, go back to this kind of way of living where small specialized teams are the most crucial aspect in human history. Like I think most things that in life, there was some sort of like a tribe or a cult, as I like to call them, behind them that were pushing them. So if you look, presidents have their teams, and so the guy I work for, the team that like he essentially goes, he implements projects for like large multinational corporations. Currently working for one of the largest, if not the largest, publisher in the world. So we're working on digital transformation, but what he does essentially, he brings out his own team. So like he'll be managing it. He's a program manager, so he'll be managing the entire operation of multi-million-dollar program. And but the thing is, he'll always bring in teams. And the reason why is, and I'm currently noticing this, my current one of my current roles is that it's very political. It's better to have people that can trust you, that you can trust, that have your back, and that you can be open with, and that you're culturally very similar to. So that's one of the things I've learned is that it's better to have people that you can trust and then slowly train them up. And unless they're really really stupid or really really lazy, like most I believe personally, like most people can change if you push them hard enough. And I've seen it happen. I've seen like some crazy things happen in life in terms of people that you thought weren't going to be losers, but like they turn themselves around. And yeah, that's one thing to note. So
Yeah, a lot of people they look demotivated because they have nothing that's worth being motivated over. And if you're managing people, one of the things you have to do is make it so that there's some reason why those people are doing what they're doing. And the paychecks usually not enough. There's got to be something else as well. And you got to make the mission somehow important to them. Make it really matter. And that you'll find people that are completely demotivated can suddenly become motivated when they want to, when there's something that they actually care about. And that's hard to get people to care about things if you, depending on your industry, if you don't have anything that's interesting for them. And so it can be a really real challenge for management to figure out how to make it interesting for the employee.
yeah, and this is an issue I face with like consulting clients. So I've had a few clients where they said their team is, it's not performing well, they're missing, they're lackadaisical, all these issues, right? And then I just noticed like these teams are not being engaged. Like, how much contact time do you have with these teams? Like, are you engaging with this person as as a human? And like that's such a deep issue. So one of the main things I suggest to people is like, have you ever had a one-on-one session with this guy, that's not showing up to certain sessions? What's the human reason behind this? And I don't know, there's loads of reasons, and if you have to be willing to like, be able to motivate people. And I think I've gotten to a point where like I can come in to a team, mesh pretty well with everyone, adapt, to how they talk and how they speak and all these different, cultural signifiers, and basically improve their team, operate, implement certain things that will, create a good team. And one of the ways is communication, man. If you don't have communication in your team, be it the boss or be it internally, like if the person's not engaged, if they're in a silo, if they have no friends, and in a working environment, then it's going to be a huge issue. And one of the things I suggest is like getting people to help each other within the team. So it's not just that you only communicate with the boss or you only communicate with one person. No, you need you need to have you need to be able to solve problems together. And I think
Hmm.
that's one of the main things that really engages people. It's like having a sort of manner bond or cult, whatever you want to call it. It's like once they have these like human connections with people, like, all right, we're here, we've got a mission. It starts to motivate people 100%.
Absolutely. I find a lot of people, and this is especially in many ways, if you talk to women about what do you like about their job. So I ask people, what do you like or don't like about your job? For women, what they like or don't like is almost always connected with the people they work with. And even with men, about half the time, oh yeah, I like the people I work with. Or why don't you like your job? Oh man, the people at my business are all a bunch of jerks. And so whatever it is, it's that people, and what that means is their internal culture and their internal communication is garbage. And so people are demotivated, and you're not going to get if a person hates their job, they're not going to be productive. They're going to do just enough not to get fired. And if they hate it enough, they'll do just a little less than what's necessary to get fired so that they get fired. There's a lot of people intentionally get fired because they hate their job. And that's, you can't run a business like that. And this is actually a huge problem in bigger companies as well, where I've been on consulting projects where they asked, how do we get the kind of spirit that happens in a small 10-man company where everybody knows each other and they're all together on their mission? How do we bring that into a big corporation? And I basically told them that it's almost impossible, because in that small corporation, you have everyone that's there was handpicked, was carefully selected, and is there because they care about what's going on. Whereas you have a big corporation, you often end up getting these people foisted upon you. And it's a real tough mission to get even mediocre levels of productivity in big corporations. So it's important to have people that know how to create that environment. And I think there's a huge productivity improvement that is not being leveraged at a lot of companies. They don't have someone like you that can help them with that aspect of their internal culture. Well, it's been great speaking with you today, Grit. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been good. And if people want to follow you, it's at GritCult on Twitter. It's in the notes below these videos. There's going to be a link to your Twitter account. I suggest following him. He posts brilliant stuff. And thank you all for joining us today and listening to this podcast. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you for watching our video, and I hope it inspired you to take action in your life. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video to get more agency building content. The real secret sauce is in our newsletter. Click on the link in the video description below to sign up. I promise I won't flood your inbox, and anything that we do send you will be of high value.